Hey folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and we are back with the next installment of our modern hardtail Mustang shootout. And the last time I had reviewed the Squier Sonic Mustang, and today I'm very excited because we are going to be unboxing and checking out this Fender Player II Mustang. I just want to thank the kind folks over at Zounds for sending this guitar on loan to me for me to review it all for you, and I'm super excited because I've never actually had one of these on the bench. I've never actually played one of these in the store because, as you know, I definitely am much more of a vintage style offset guy, and I haven't checked out too many of the modern interpretations of the various offsets that exist today. So yeah, I'm very curious and interested to see how this goes because I did quite like the very budget but also pretty darn good Squier Sonic Mustang, and I'm imagining that this is going to be an elevated version of that. So as an offset guitar tech in New York, it's funny because Mustangs don't come around very often. I don't know if too many folks play them. I know a handful of bands that have them in their main roster of guitars, but the majority of offset players, unsurprisingly, are folks who play mostly jazz masters, with Jaguars coming in, I would say, a distant second place. Even here in New York City, where their offset guitars are basically like part of the indie band uniform, and even bands that don't play indie music are rocking them these days as they've become quite mainstream. If I'm honest, I am super stoked for this. All right, we've got the little baggie with the Allen keys for adjustment. There is a Fender Studio QR code card in here, and just a standard little red pamphlet. One thing that is surprising though is that there's no gig bag in here. I was expecting at minimum that maybe there would be kind of like a thin slip case or something, but no gig bag at all. So we've got a very peculiar looking boxing setup here. I've never seen this before. It's kind of like it straps onto the neck. Fascinating. So the rest of the packaging here is very similar to what we saw with the Squier, with just this kind of foamish sheet that it comes in to protect the finish. But it would not protect much more if, you know, if your UPS or FedEx guy decides to throw this across the truck or off the truck. Ooh, all right, here we go. Ooh, that noise. Why? Why? Why do we have to do this? All right. So there we have it. A black Fender Mustang Player II here. Very cool. And yeah, this thing looks and feels pretty darn nice. I didn't even remember what color I ordered from Zounds. I don't think I really had a preference. So before we do anything, let's just go over a couple of the specs on this bad boy. We've got an alder body, and it's got a polyurethane finish gloss on the body. We've got more of a satin tinted polyurethane. So unlike the Sonic Mustang, this has that vintage tint to it, and definitely feels a lot higher quality than the finish that's on the Squier, which is barely there at all. If you've ever played like an Affinity Squier, for example, and you're like me as a kid from the 90s, you know, those instruments felt super cheap. And for sure, despite the fact that it did exceed a lot of my expectations, because I was expecting the Squier Sonic Mustang to be absolutely terrible, no doubt this neck finish here alone just feels a lot more premium than that one. It has a rosewood fretboard with rolled fingerboard edges, which you can really, really feel and just feel really nice in hand. Very, very high quality and premium feeling. As far as controls go, it's very minimal on this. No longer do we have the three-way slide switches like on a traditional vintage style Mustang, traded in place like on the Squier Sonic Mustang for a three-way toggle switch and just your standard volume and tone knobs, as well as your input jack on the control plate here. Now, because I still have the Squier Sonic Mustang here, another key difference between these two is the type of hardtail design, with a top-loading hardtail bridge on this, and we've got a string through the body hardtail type bridge on the Player II. This string through the body design is definitely going to result in having a lot more sustain than the top-loading type of hardtail bridge, and you can notice here that this hardtail bridge is definitely a lot fancier than the other one. We've got vintage style kind of saddles here, very similar to what you will find on a vintage style Stratocaster, rather than the blocky, chunky kind of die cast saddles that are on the Squier. And I'm pretty sure that you won't be able to see, but it's got the little Fender stamp on each one of those saddles. These are also nickel-plated steel saddles with a steel base. So again, all of those things are going to result in having a bit more sustain, a bit cleaner and more articulate of a sound, and definitely a lot more high-end on tap rather than the, I'm not quite sure even what kind of metals are being used on the Squier, but definitely not as high quality as what is on here. Now, as far as what's going on under the hood, we've got a set of Player Series Alnico 5 Mustang pickups. Again, a big change, and I'm expecting them to sound a lot better than the ceramic pickups that were in the Squier Sonic Mustang. We've actually got the full-sized Jaguar / Mustang / Jazz bass style knobs here. And we've also got a three-way toggle, and our lead volume and tone controls. All of the electronics being used here are the higher quality parts, such as your CTS pots for your volume and tone, as well as the Fender branded three-way toggle switch. Now, much like the Vintera 2 series, the Player II reintroduced rosewood as the fretboard material on these, which is a welcome change. It's got white dot inlays as well as medium jumbo frets and a 9.5-inch radius. The truss rod adjustment is at the headstock for convenience. And we've also got a synthetic bone nut, as well as vintage style classic gear tuners. You can see that they look like your standard kind of Kluson or Goto vintage style tuners, with the exception of the fact that we are using some kind of locking nut mechanism rather than the standard type of vintage style bushings. But from the back, and I believe the whole thing with the classic gear tuners is that they are supposed to be drop-in replacements for guitars that have the modern style tuners that have the retaining pin on the back of the casings. I'm pretty sure that the classic gear tuners are 18:1 ratio tuners, so that they are high quality and should be very, very responsive and stable overall. Now, unlike the Vintera 2 offsets that I've had on the bench and serviced over the past couple of years, the Player II Mustang here actually does have shielding, but not everywhere. It at least does have shielding paint in the pickup cavities, but strangely does not have shielding paint for the lead control cavity or where the three-way toggle switch goes, which is a curious omission. Like, how much more work would that have taken to apply the paint there? I'm not sure, but it's the choice that they made. As far as shielding for the pick guard itself, it barely exists. There's basically an oval of aluminum adhesive shield right around where the three-way toggle is, but that is pretty much it. Also, the rest of the wiring is your standard PVC coated wiring. Now, while this is definitely not as light as the Squier Sonic Mustang, it is still crazy light. I wouldn't be surprised if this is right at, you know, the 7-pound mark. It is very, very, very light in hand right now. A departure from even vintage Mustangs, which can easily weigh 8 pounds or more. And that's bizarre to me because there's even less wood routed from this. Maybe with the exception of the pickup cavities here are a bit bigger than those on vintage style Mustang bodies. But yeah, that said, we've got a lighter instrument overall, which I think most players will welcome. A couple other things of note, as I had mentioned from the top, this does have one of the hallmarks of the Player II series, which is the rolled fingerboard edges. It just gives a nice worn in and much more comfortable feel in hand as you are fretting all across the board. And that is a nice little touch that they have put on this series. And lastly, on the back of the neck, you've got your typical skunk stripe here for the truss rod, as well as a Fender F-stamped neck plate. Now, very quick impressions out of the boxes. I haven't even tuned this thing up. It's definitely out of tune, but I can already tell that the action is set a little bit higher than that on the Squier Mustang. Very similar to my findings when comparing the Fender Ventera 2 Bass 6 to the Squier Bass 6. And so I don't know if that's just the standard protocol out in Ensenada, but yeah, the action feels a little bit higher here. The synthetic bone nut seems to be cut overall fairly well, if not conservatively. Maybe slightly shallow on the nut slots, giving you a bunch of room for adjustment. But then again, you are not going to be getting those nut slots as low as you would on a vintage style Mustang because these are medium jumbo frets after all. Now, before we tune this thing up and plug it in, I also just wanted to talk about the neck profile. Fender is billing this as a modern C. It does not feel overly chunky to me. It actually feels pretty slim in hand, especially if you've become accustomed to the thicker necks that Fender has been putting on pretty much all of their offset models for probably at least the past decade or so, with that changing only with the reintroduction of rosewood again on their Ventera 2 series, and now I'm noticing it's the same thing on their Player 2 series. So yeah, not much shoulder to this neck. It almost feels like more of a D kind of taper to me, because I almost feel like the definition for a C-shaped neck has changed over the past decade plus, with them feeling much more significant in hand. And so this is a nice return to form, and I'm excited to actually tune this thing up and get to play it because it feels like it's going to be a treat. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead, tune this bad boy up. These classic gear tuners are nice and responsive, accurate. I am not getting any slippage, and tuning right now feels very, very fast and easy. So no negative notes on these tuners at all. I'm also just going to note that I'm not feeling the strings at this moment in time catching at the nut, nor am I hearing any sounds that are showcasing or evidencing that they are catching up there. So as of right now, it seems the nut has been cut at least appropriately for the stock strings here, which are, I believe, 9 to 42 gauge strings. As I said in the Squier Sonic Mustang review, I don't really know why they continue to put 9 gauge strings on short scale guitars. That said, you can make it work. It's all really in the setup, especially when it comes to Mustangs like this that don't actually have a vibrato on them. This hardtail design should make it pretty easy to handle even strings as light as 9 gauge. So already, I don't know if you all can hear that. But I'm getting a pretty significant buzzing coming from the bridge that wasn't evident even on the Squier Sonic Mustang, and likely I'm going to go ahead and guess that that is because we've got either some loose set screws here at the bridge, probably on one of these saddles here, but something is rattling and is loose. And so if I owned one of these to address that, I definitely much like a broken record that I am, would be applying some Loctite Purple to all of those grubs across the board, as well as the intonation screws, and maybe so a little bit of that would get on your springs here, and that would be totally fine and would help to reduce any kind of unwanted vibrations that are coming from the bridge. So that's a bummer that we are having that kind of noise. But another curious thing that I'm noticing on this guitar, unlike other Fenders that are even cheaper than this, is that they do not have the little bushing underneath the string tree here. And so that leads to a much more severe break angle behind the nut here, and that makes those strings a lot tighter. And I'm not sure if they're doing that because these classic gear tuners don't look like they're staggered at all, and I'm not sure why they would omit that kind of part. So adding one of those string tree bushings that typically come with a Fender string tree set might reduce that break angle and maybe make this a little less severe. In fact, I am curious enough to want to try that out. So what I've got here is just the little bushing that typically comes with a string tree. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this thing on the bench, install this, and then I will be back. And so I did go ahead and install that little bushing, but it actually made no difference. So the issue is definitely at the saddle side on this, because it has got this awful kind of pinging sound going on. So we're going to see if maybe adding a little bit of Loctite and making sure that this is properly intonated is going to actually fix that. All right, folks. So I am back. This just came off the bench. I just wanted to share a couple of my findings. So I haven't been able to completely dial that out for a couple of reasons. So first of all, this is a loaner guitar. It is expected to go back to Zounds exactly the same way that it came to me in factory new condition. So I am not allowed to, unfortunately, add Loctite to the saddles and screws. I'm not allowed to do things like, file down the nut slots and things like that. And so I believe that the issue may be twofold. I believe that the nut slots here might have been cut a little bit too straight on both the B as well as the high E. There is a combination of a bit of rattle coming from the bridge, as well as a bit of that sitar kind of sound happening. Reseating these strings does help it a little bit, and I did adjust and play around with the saddle set screws a little bit, and I was able to dial a bunch of it out. It's definitely a lot better than it was before, right? So it's definitely not a permanent issue. And the other thing that I did is that this thing had a significant amount of up bow, and that is when the fretboard and neck are curving away from the strings with too much relief. So I minimized that relief, and now that also helped to minimize that noise a bit, and also the action overall of the guitar feels better. Now, I know we haven't even plugged this thing in yet, but another recommendation that I have, I feel like one of the issues that's being presented here is because of the fact that these strings are just not heavy enough on this short scale guitar to keep these saddles from actually like moving slightly laterally speaking. And so they're kind of buzzing against each other because you can see that there is some slight movement that you can pull out when you're bending on strings, and these things can move. And also the fact that these saddles don't actually have grooves on them, and so they can stray off of center fairly easily. And so that is one of the other reasons why I definitely do recommend. I mean, if this was my own personal Mustang, I would probably be rocking 11s on this, at minimum 10s. But I find that 11s feel just like 10s on a short scale guitar anyway. And so that added stability for me is a bonus, and why I would switch to 11s. But this is playable enough now that we can actually plug it in. So before we even play it through, I know that a lot of folks who are watching are probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is $600+ more expensive than the Squier Sonic that I reviewed last time. And yet, I'm having issues already right out of the box, and obviously not a good look, but it definitely is something that can be dialed out. So I want you to take that caveat into consideration. The out-of-the-box setup is not the end-all be-all, and if you're willing to put in that time and work, or bring it to a qualified tech to do it for you, you can rest assured that these issues can be dialed out. But that said, it is a bit disappointing that I couldn't just tune it up, plug in and play like I did on the much cheaper Squier Sonic Mustang. But again, that was a very similar experience to what I experienced with the Vintera 2. But that said, it obviously didn't take very much time for me to dial in that Vintera 2. And I would imagine if I had the leeway to be able to make the kind of adjustments and modifications, such as the adding of the Loctite, or the filing, a bit more of an angle on the back of the treble string nut slots, that the issue would literally be fixed by me in about 10 minutes. All right, so we are plugged in now. Let's go ahead, throw our headphones on, and see what this thing sounds like. All right, we are going to start at the bridge pickup. This time, as you can hear, it is quite noisy. Again, I'm not sure what Fender Mexico is doing with their pickups, but for whatever reasons, they are significantly noisier than their Squier, as well as higher end Fender counterparts. So that's our bridge pickup. Middle, and our neck. So just in playing open chords there, I can already hear that these pickups definitely have a lot more chime to them. There's a lot more body to the sound. And also they sound louder, but they don't sound as aggressive. They're not like hitting my tube amp and making it kind of overdrive as quickly. And so I feel like that comes down to the Alnico 5 magnets that are being used in the construction of these pickups. And I think overall they definitely sound way better than the ones on the Squier Sonic Mustang. And you can also just hear that kind of sparkle, and you can also hear how much more this guitar is sustaining. I can literally feel these strings like vibrating through the whole body with this string through configuration for this hardtail. And so that definitely makes the overall tone and sound of this guitar just that much sweeter. Just for the rest of the review, so that we're not fighting the tuning, we're just going to go ahead and stretch our strings lightly so that we don't break any. All right, my friends, so we are back from playing, and I've got some thoughts. I did want to share that behind the scenes, I did take a measurement of the output of these pickups, and they are 6.4K on the bridge pickup, and we've got 6.09 on the neck pickup, so ever so slightly hotter than those on the Squier. But again, they weren't making my amp break up because they just have an overall smoother sound to them, despite being higher output. And so I definitely prefer this sound over the sound of the Squier one. Now, these unboxings and these first impressions kind of reviews are not supposed to be definitive tellings of the quality, but more relaying to you how it is to order one of these brand new from whoever your favorite retailer may be, and the experience that you may very well have if unboxing one yourself. And much like the Vintera Bass 6, again, I experienced a lot more of a learning curve, so to speak, or this guitar needing a lot more of a setup than even the $230 Squier. Now, should that deter you from getting one of these? I don't think so, right? If you have an hour and have just minimal guitar setup tools, very basic ones, or you have, a good and qualified tech somewhere near you that is affordable for you, then by all means, having these very, very common and not very serious issues dealt with is well worth it, and will result overall in a much better playing instrument. And, if no parts at all were changed and compared with the $230 Squier, you can definitely feel just the overall higher quality and craftsmanship that did go into this guitar. Now, again, very similarly to the Vintera 2, the fretboard on here is pretty level. I only found 2 high spots on this fretboard as compared to, the 5 or 6 that I had found on the Squier. Both of them are well within, the scope of what one would experience on even, $2,000 plus Fender, Gibson, Gretsch, whatever kind of guitars you are into. A lot of that does come down, unfortunately, to how long the guitar has been in storage, the environmental conditions that it's been kept in, and because the necks will shift, and sometimes if the frets weren't glued in well or not leveled well, then unfortunately you're going to happen upon those. But on this one, there were just two slight high frets on here that were not contributing at all to that kind of rattly pinging sound, which I had mentioned before. But overall, I think the neck on this thing just feels absolutely divine. It feels like a much more expensive neck. In fact, I feel like this neck reminds me of the necks that are featured on Fender's much more expensive American Pro line, with the rolled fretboard edges being an even nicer feature than is featured on those. Overall, the tuning stability of this after stretching the strings was pretty decent. If this was my guitar, would probably not be rushing out to swap out these classic gear tuners. If anything, I would probably go to replace the synthetic nut with a bone nut and slot them for thicker gauge strings like 11th, because that's my personal preference on short scale guitars. And I think that also would improve the overall sustain and stability. I think it could help to address some of the rattling from the saddles, because the more string pressure and tightness that you are adding, then the less movement that these little saddles can make laterally, and they won't end up vibrating against each other in a way that is not ideal. Now, another thing of note as compared to the Squier is I am not feeling that much or any fret sprout on this one at all. I believe this is a 2025 model, so a year newer than the Squier, so likely is fresher from the factory, so to speak. And yeah, the fit and finish of everything for the most part, with the exception of that basic setup, which does need to be dialed in, is actually quite good on this Mustang. Now, do I recommend this guitar? I absolutely do. This is for a very specific kind of player, one that does not have the constitution to deal with the Mustang's, original dynamic vibrato, which is its own kind of pain. And even with the American Performer Mustang, which has improved and stabilized some of the annoying and common issues on the original dynamic vibrato, some people just want a hardtail. They do not want to have to fuss with a rocking bridge. They don't want to have to fuss with the cigar bar. And so this bare bones approach to the Mustang, I can see appealing to a lot of folks that just want to plug in and play and not have to worry about a lot of additional variables. Now, as far as mods are concerned, unfortunately, these are not routed for the traditional Mustang controls up here. So if you wanted to convert this to more of a vintage style Mustang, you would have to get your router out and route for those channels, because they are not present here. Additionally, you can get your out of phase tones that the original Mustang had through push-pull pot configurations as well, and that would require no modification to the actual husk of the guitar. Overall, I think that this is a solid and good feeling guitar and quite fun to play. I am missing my vibrato action, one of my favorite parts of the Mustang. Of course, I'm missing it, but this, like a good telly, for example, you can just really lace into this thing, and it just feels solid and sturdy, and really fun to play. And yeah, I think that a lot of people who like the overall aesthetics of the Mustang but aren't in the mood to deal with its inherent quirks would find this iteration of the Mustang much more to their liking. Anyway, after reviewing these two, it's opened my eyes to the world of hardtail Mustangs, and I found them both to be quite enjoyable to play, and I'm glad that both exist, both their low and also moderate price points to fit the budgets of a lot of different players. I definitely think that this one beats out the Squier with regards to just the overall quality and feel and sound and everything. But this one is nothing to scoff at, especially for the price. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative, especially if you've been on the hunt for the perfect modern style Mustang for you. if you're looking to pick one of these bad boys up yourself, I highly recommend that you get them from Zounds, who is the sponsor of today's video, and again lent me both of these guitars to review them for you all, so thank you to them. I love being a customer of Zounds and have been for over 10 years now. They are my go-to usually for purchasing gear, especially because they have affordable payment plans where you can split up your gear purchases into 6 or 12-month installments with absolutely zero interest, unlike a lot of retailers out there who are using services like Affirm or Synchrony, who very routinely have interest rates as high as 30%, and if you end up missing a payment, forget about it. It's basically highway robbery. On top of it, the application process for the pay-as-you-go plans is very simple. There is no intense paperwork to do. There's no background or credit checks. They don't even ask for your social security number, which is awesome. And also, if anything goes wrong with your order, anything is broken or defective from the factory, Zounds really makes it easy for you. Returns and refunds and all that. In the few times that I've had to hit them up for those kinds of things, they were very quick to process return labels and refund my money with no questions asked. And so yet another reason why I really appreciate Zounds as a music gear retailer. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you really like my channel and enjoy what I do and want to support me and help my videos reach more folks, try out that new YouTube hype feature. It supposedly helps with reach, and if you have the time, I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.